Roger,
How's it going?
we're back again,
We are back again.
and today we want to talk about something that I think a lot of people love talking about.
Yes.
I mean, I like talking about it, you like talking about it.
I don't like talking about it.
But I will also say it's full of trepidation. People are, I think, afraid to be exposed but not knowing what they're talking about with this specific topic. And we're talking today about wine. So we want to cover this from a couple of different angles. One, to start with a very basic intro about what types of wine there are.
Yep.
But then also talk about what are the trends in wine. So depending on if your friends are already wine aficionados, then you can talk to them more about the trends.
Yep.
But if not, you need to know a little bit to get stuck in. Let's start with 101. What's wine for dummies?
Wine for dummies. It's a good place to start. And I think wine is a topic that you meet a lot of people who know a lot about it. But there's actually quite a few people who don't really know very much, and it sometimes can be a bit intimidating, or sometimes we'll often pretend that we know, which I've definitely done.
I've done it as well.
Yes. Starting with the basics, wine obviously gets created. You have different varieties of grapes, and through slight variances in the way it gets processed, it gets created into wine. Each region is known for certain types of grapes, and certain regions are known for certain types of wine. And because of all these different types, that's what's really made it not only quite popular, it's a huge passion for a lot of people. And you become very, very well versed on it very easily. Very simply, there is a red wine, which is made from the dark colored grapes with skin contact. So examples of that would be what you commonly see at most restaurants in terms of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir. Mm-hmm. There's white wine, which is made from green or yellow grapes. So there's no skin contact normally. That's Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, normally served cold. There's rosé wine, which is also served cold. That's made from red grapes, but with brief skin contact for a pink hue. So that's Grenache.
So a little dip in.
Little dip. Syrah, they use Pinot Noir grapes, but again, very little skin contact. And then there's sparkling wine, which is often only for celebrations, but it's very popular. That's carbonated, and that's through a second fermentation process. So that's like champagne, prosecco, etc. Mm-hmm. So now those are the kind of typical types of wines, but every region is known for certain types of grapes, because of the climate, and also the wineries in terms of how they do the wines, how old the wine is. So there's a lot of different factors that dictate a really good wine.
Yeah. So you said region a few times, and I think switching over to kind of a little bit more what's happening in wine, the world of wine. You think of wine, you think of France, you think of Italy, Spain.
Yep.
I hear this called the old world.
Yes.
But tell me, what's the new world? What's happening? Is there a transfer happening, or what's the situation?
Yeah, so I think old world, if you think about it, refers more to where it was originally grown. Mm-hmm. So France always comes to everyone's mind because they've been growing it for many years. So a lot of the grapes and the vineyards, how old they are, will typically dictate also how good the wine is. So they've got 100-year-old vineyards, right? So the reason why they're synonymous with it is because it's been doing it for a long time. Now, the reason why they call it the old world is because that's how it traditionally was done. But what happened is they took a lot of those grapes, or essentially the seeds, and then they planted it into other regions, which is where we enter the New World. Now, when we talk about Old World, we're really referring to France, obviously. So places like Bordeaux, which is known for Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, Burgundy's known for Pinot Noir, Champagne, all the very common, when you think of wine, they're typically key. Italy as well has Tuscany. It has Sicily, also known for wine, but their wines typically are more food-friendly and diverse. You've got Spain, which is a bit more bolder reds and great value. So think Tempranillo, think Cava. You got Portugal, which is obviously Porto, just very well known for wine. They're normally known for very strong fortified wine, so port, and they have really unique grape types. And then Germany, which is known for aromatic wines, so things like Rieslings. They were doing really well, but now you've got this new world coming in. So first is the United States, which is the complete opposite of Europe, but they've actually become very popular with things like the Napa Valley, Sonoma, which is same Cabernets and Chardonnays. France is now having to deal with the US doing something, you know, almost at par with what they're doing. And those are really bold, you know, fruit-forward wines like France. Argentina has these high altitude vineyards, and they've got really rich reds. So like the Malbecs come from Argentina. You got Chile, which is quite interesting actually, because they've got like kind of consistent climate. So in terms of wines, they're also seen as quite great value. You've got Australia, which I'm personally very happy about, because we've got good regions like Barossa Valley, Margaret River. Barossa is known for like the reds with Shiraz. Margaret River is known for like Cabernet, Chardonnays. Very powerful reds, but also because of the climate, we've really sunshine-driven flavors, really bright. If you think there's a huge push around the lighter wines now, so Australia's done really well. And then New Zealand also has the Marlborough has really like kind of Sauvignon Blanc is really strong, and Central Otago as well. So they all have these new regions that can create really good wines that are now rivaling that old world.
Thank you firstly for that overview, because I think it was like very good, concise overview of what is wine and where does it come from.
Yep.
I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of listeners. I also want to talk like a little bit more advanced, let's say.
Yeah.
We always have like the 3 talking points, right? Like what's kind of things that are happening right now that can weave into a conversation. So you mentioned some grape varietals.
Yep.
I think everyone knows, right? Maybe Cabernet, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Malbec, etc. But I'm hearing that there's like newer varietals, grapes that you maybe not necessarily have heard of, that are kind of really rising in popularity now.
Yeah, so there's now these new grapes and these new wines that are coming out of the woodwork, and they're really challenging the norm. So an example of that is the French Aligoté. So that's traditionally used as a base for cure. It's now being recognized for its potential as a varietal wine. It's mainly because of like the rising temperatures that it's kind of come out, but it's showing as quite trendy. And we see a lot of these kind of more trendy wines coming in. Another example is we're seeing like these orange and skin contact wines becoming more common, which was unheard of. Like we spoke about the red wines and the white wines, but now you've got these orange wines, which are not only becoming popular, but they're now also joining those wine lists, which is challenging because it's a very traditional industry. And you're now almost going against the trend. Another example is the Spanish Rosado. It's very complex, but it's seen as challenging the norm in terms of like how they do the wine. There's also other ones like that are made pretty more resilient. So there's one called Regent, which is a disease-resistant red. It's actually done in Germany and the UK. It's got really ripe berry flavors, but it's actually made to be more sustainable.
So it needs less pesticides and stuff.
Yeah, less pesticides, but also if you think about with changing climates, if you think about there's a lot more, there's a lot more risk. So how do they then create more resilient grapes and resilient wines?
Got it.
Yeah.
I think people's attitudes to wine are like sort of changing. I think like one good example was like a lot of my friends now are adding ice cubes to wine.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, I don't know, my parents' generation, like big no-no.
Yeah.
Right? Like big no-no to put ice in your wine. Is what people want out of wine changing? Do you think that there's a trend there, or?
There is definitely a trend. A lot of wineries or a lot of wines, the industry is actually not doing well in a lot of cases. But where they have been very successful are things like Chardonnays and the lighter wines. So people are moving from the traditionals and they're moving to the much lighter wines, the crisper Chardonnays, the lighter bodied reds. Pinot Noir is a very good example of that. That's a lot more popular than the much more fuller bodied ones. And if you also think where people do most of drinking is in warmer months, kind of leans towards that. I think the ice cubes is definitely obvious. I think people having cooler wines. So we're seeing not only rosé, but also like chilled reds as well, becoming quite popular. So it's really changing how people are drinking wine, which means that the actual industry is also evolving as well. But this is great because it means that I think a lot of wines are now having to be experimental with how they do things, a bit more creative with how they actually create their wines and their products.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been noticing a lot at the supermarket, again, like when I was younger, box wine was terrible, right? Like that was the low of the low.
But you bought it because it was cheap.
I bought it because it was cheap. But now I'm seeing a lot more wine in like cans and cartons and all this kind of stuff. And I assume there's like a sustainability thing behind it. But what's driving this push?
Yeah, so there is definitely a sustainability side of things. You also have to think, these are businesses and they think of cost, right?
Right.
Wine bottles are expensive.
Glass is heavy.
Glass is heavy. It's difficult to manufacture. They also have to recycle it. You also have to think even just making thinner glass or lighter glass is easier to transport. It's also cheaper. So when you have a lot of these wineries making things at such scale, they start taking into these accounts. So yes, they start looking at, okay, well, how can we make this more sustainable? So box wine or, new ways in which they can package the wine. But the challenge there is the taste, because that's really essentially the main factor with the product. So how do they make sure they can do it in cans? Creates a whole different kind of profile. Wine in a can sounds a bit strange, but it is definitely being done.
Yeah.
If you think about people having things like rosé, they can actually have it now in cans. You can have it iced in an esky versus
rosé all day.
Rosé all day, iced rosé all day. So there's that, but also the sustainability side of things. It's like how many bottles you're creating, recycling the glass versus cans. A lot cheaper, a lot easier to recycle, a lot more sustainable, a lot more easy to transport. So I think a lot of companies are now trying to think, how can we make this more effective in terms of being able to give it the same product, but obviously reduce cost, but also reduce waste. Yeah.
Now, we always like to end with the thought-provoking question that you could ask a room full of wine lovers. What's something that would really get the room talking, you think?
Yeah, so we've spoken a little bit about the traditions around the different grapes, the traditions around how wines are made, New World, Old World, but there is a trend now to combined. We're seeing hybrid is definitely a very popular thing in all sorts of different industries, but the wine industry is no exception. Maxime Chevroutier has got French grapes and Australian grapes and combined them, which is very different to the norm. It's really creating these international blends is seen as something new and innovative and is very much challenging the industry. So the question I would ask is, do you think this is right? Do you think this is forbidden in the wine culture to do this? Or do you think this is the natural evolution, like a lot of other things where we start combining the best characteristics of different things to then create something new?
That does sound really interesting.
Yeah, it is really good. And also, I think combining France and Australia, how can you go wrong, right?
Two great countries. What can you say? Well, thank you so much for this, Roger. This conversation has made me very thirsty. We're lucky that it's almost knocking off time. To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this. We hope you learned something. We hope you feel more confident and empowered to have conversations with your friends and colleagues about wine. Again, if you do have any feedback for us, or if you want to request that we cover a specific topic, please feel free to reach out to us. And again, we hope you found some common ground.